Jerusalem, 1,400 years ago. A major Christian stronghold, controlled by the powerful Byzantine Empire. In 636, this marvel of a city would be conquered by the Rashidun Caliphate and fall into Muslim hands for the first time in history. But what did this legendary city look like in its last years under Roman rule? And what was life like inside these ancient stones that still hold profound spiritual significance to three world religions? This is a reconstruction of Jerusalem, powered by total war. Keep watching till the end. Jerusalem was situated on a plateau in the Judean hills, approximately 2,500 feet above sea level. This elevation has provided Jerusalem with both strategic and spiritual significance over the centuries. Steep valleys encompass the city and have shaped its development for millennia. To the east lies the Kidron Valley, which divides Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. On the west and south, the steep Hinnom Valley forms another natural boundary, forming a protective arm around three sides of the city. This steep topography effectively rendered Jerusalem a natural fortress, open to attack primarily from the north, which explains why the northern walls were always the most heavily fortified. The city walls were formidable. Built on foundations that go back to Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, it consisted of huge, dressed stones weighing several tons each. But the walls that stood in 636 CE were the result of reconstructions undertaken in the 5th century during the reign of Empress Eudocia and represented the finest Byzantine military architecture. These walls enclosed a smaller area than Herod's original defenses, favoring defensible borders and key religious sites. Lookouts and defense towers were spaced evenly along the walls, with especially tall and heavily fortified towers positioned at the corners and along the vulnerable northern border. The city was controlled in its entry by a series of heavily defended gates. The main entrance, the Damascus Gate, in the northern wall, had a typical Byzantine design and twin flanking towers. Other significant entrances were the Zion Gate to the south and what came to be called the Jaffa Gate to the west. Jerusalem was defended by its Byzantine garrison, some 1,000 men strong. The garrison were professional infantrymen carrying spears, swords, and typical oval shields, backed up by archers and cavalrymen. These troops were drawn primarily from throughout the empire, rather than locally. By 636, when Muslim armies closed in, this garrison was the only remnant of Constantinople's once mighty military presence in the city. Deeper into the city, in the Christian quarter of the western part of Jerusalem, stood the gem of Byzantine Jerusalem, the breathtaking church of the Holy Sepulchre. Constructed in the 4th century by Emperor Constantine, it had been expanded over centuries to become a resplendent complex by the early 7th century. The rotunda, known as the Anastasis, or Resurrection, boasted a towering dome above the place that Christians believed Jesus Christ was buried in. It was encircled by ornate chapels, colonnaded courtyards, and chambers for the thousands of pilgrims who journeyed here. By this time, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was not just a building, but the holy center of Byzantine Jerusalem and the holiest place in Christianity. Pilgrims from across the whole empire and even farther away made the journey of months to pray here, repeatedly brought to tears upon arrival. Close by is the Nea Church, constructed under Emperor Justinian in 543 CE, a gigantic basilica to compare only with the Holy Sepulchre in size and grandeur. The third holiest place in Jerusalem was the Church of Holy Zion, which was believed to be the site where Jesus shared the Last Supper with his disciples. Along the same street was a number of monasteries and chapels serving locals as well as pilgrims. Standing prominently on the eastern side of the city was the Temple Mount, site of the destroyed Jewish temple of 70 CE. Although there were likely still remnants of the temple platform buildings visible at this time, during the Byzantine period, the Temple Mount was a largely empty space. Jerusalem in 636 remained Christian, but smaller Jewish communities were populating the city as well. In the southeastern quarter stood Jerusalem's modest theatre, a remnant of Roman influence. By the 7th century, instead of the bawdy performances of earlier times, it primarily hosted religious plays depicting biblical stories during major festivals. A small hippodrome nearby, once used for chariot races, now served primarily for occasional riding demonstrations and military parades. Unlike other Roman cities, Jerusalem never fully embraced gladiatorial combat or animal hunts, as religious sensibilities, first Jewish then Christian, had always tempered such spectacles. Daily life in Byzantine Jerusalem still relied on the advanced city systems the Romans had built. Among these engineering masterpieces were the aqueducts that supplied fresh water, the sophisticated sewage systems that maintained sanitation, and the grand public bathhouses. The public bathhouses remained focal points of civic social life, where citizens gathered not merely for purification, but for commerce, politics, and amusement as well. The baths maintain the standard Roman plan of frigidarium, meaning cold bath, tepidarium, meaning warm bath, and caldarium, meaning hot bath. Although by the 7th century, they have largely been modified to accommodate Christian traditions. The city's water system was no less impressive. Without a major river, Jerusalem would have managed on a network of cisterns, aqueducts, and reservoirs. Water was transported from springs in the Judean hills, particularly from Solomon's Pools, located about 12 kilometers south of the city, via stone aqueducts that stretched across the hilly terrain. Beneath the streets were massive underground cisterns, some dating back centuries, storing precious rainwater beneath the city. These cisterns were often hewn from solid rock, reaching depths of up to 15 meters, supported by stone columns, and could collectively hold thousands of cubic meters of water. Beyond the walls, the Siloam Pool and Mamilla Pool were significant water reservoirs and vital for the water supply of the city. These open-air reservoirs were carved partially into bedrock with stone retaining walls, with Siloam Pool covering approximately 0.5 hectares and capable of holding enough water to supply thousands of residents during the dry summer months. Jerusalem's main street was the large Cardo Maximus, the broad colonnaded thoroughfare extended north-south from the center of the city. Paved in stone and bordered by stores and porticos offering protection from the Mediterranean sun, it bisected the Decumanus's east-west line to form the familiar grid shape of a city laid out on the Roman pattern. At intersections would have been public plazas, governmental buildings, and the remnants of a forum where public gatherings, legal proceedings, and city announcements took place. Bazaars and market stalls line both sides of the Cardo, making it a busy shopping area in Jerusalem. At the northern section, citizens haggled over vegetables, bread, and pottery. Deeper into the south, more sophisticated bazaars catered to pilgrims and wealthier residents. The air would have been filled with a cacophony of tongues, Greek, Aramaic, Syriac, Hebrew, as peddlers cried their wares. The city sold local farm goods like olive oil, wine and wheat, but got luxury items from trade routes across the Byzantine seas. Chinese silks, Indian spices and Egyptian glass all found their way into Jerusalem's markets. Society in the 7th century Jerusalem was strictly hierarchical. The clergy was on top of the social structure, with Byzantine government officials, prosperous merchants, artisans and workers below them. Most male inhabitants pursued pilgrim-directed trades as guides, innkeepers, or craftsmen of religious trinkets. In the meantime, women tended households, worked in household businesses, managed daily shopping, or served in convents. Children played in inner courtyards or assisted family trades, with the better off receiving education from clergy. At the very pinnacle of Jerusalem society was Patriarch Sophronius, the patriarch of the city's Christians. A man from Damascus who studied in Alexandria, Sophronius was a learned theologian who was chosen patriarch in 634 by a synod of local bishops. Though technically under the authority of the Byzantine governor, the patriarch wielded considerable power over the political, economic and religious affairs of Jerusalem. He rode between the patriarchal palace and the Holy Sepulchre, surrounded by clergy and officials, his importance clearly visible as everyone bowed and showed deep respect whenever he passed by. But behind the facade of all this splendor, the Jerusalem of 636 stood on a precipice of change. The Byzantine Empire, weakened by decades of conflict with Persia, plague and civil war, struggled to maintain its grip on its eastern provinces. 2 decades earlier, in 614, the Persians had invaded Roman lands deep and conquered Jerusalem. The conquest came with significant destruction of churches and a temporary exile for many Christians. While the Byzantines had regained the city in 628, the empire never regained its former vigor. In 633, the Byzantines were on the retreat again. The Rashidun Caliphate, a new empire united under the banner of Islam, emerged on the map and invaded both Roman and Persian lands. In August 636, the Muslims had decisively defeated a massive Byzantine army at the Battle of Yarmouk and isolated Jerusalem from Byzantine supplies. In late 636, Muslim armies would appear in front of Jerusalem's walls and lay siege to the city. As the sun sets beneath the ancient walls and religious sites, Jerusalem stood on the threshold of yet another transformation in its long existence. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and found value in its visualization, kindly throw your javelin at the like button and storm the subscribe button's walls. Leave a comment to let us have your honest opinion, and see you in the next one.